Hey guys, welcome to the Kane Audio vlog. It's Friday, time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Ask me anything below this video in the comment section and I'll get back to you next week answering that question. Before I go into last week's questions, house admin wise, what have I been doing? I've been working on a couple of remixes. Too early to go into any detail yet, but watch this space. I'll definitely update when there's more to say about those. What else? Oh, I've done an interview with the Limitless Vibrations podcast guys, and that is out today, I think. So I'm going to put a link below this video to the podcast, and yeah, check it out. It should hopefully tie in, I think, for most of you who are sort of regular followers of this weekly AMA. It should tie in quite nicely, actually. The guys who run the podcast are viewers of this YouTube channel, so shout out to you guys. And yeah, so it kind of ties in, I think, quite nicely. It's kind of a quite a nerdy but also a bit biographical sort of interview, so yeah, hopefully you guys will enjoy it. I don't think there's anything else to mention today, not that I can think of. Probably is, but I've forgotten. Right, I'm going to read these backwards because I can see a bunch of one-liners first. So, Yanis Lekmanis, Royal High Five. St. Nicholas, Royal High Five. Hans Ford, Royal High Five. Kevin Zramek, Royal High Five. Deadly Custard, Royal to you. High Five. Zombo, happy birthday, Dom. Cheers. Oh yeah, it was my birthday I mentioned last week, yeah. Zombo, YouTube is seriously broken. Oh, is that... That hasn't happened again, has it? Right, okay. Was it you that was... Okay, I'm hoping this... Right. So anyone who doesn't know, I think every now and then I get someone commenting saying, I posted a question last week and it's gone. And genuinely, I don't know where they go. I don't ever delete any comments. I don't care if they're spammy or whatever. So I just don't bother. But it does seem like YouTube just randomly deletes the odd comment every now and then, and so there was one last week that didn't show up, and now you're saying YouTube is broken, but I don't see anything else from you, so hopefully you didn't post it last week for this week, otherwise it's done it again. Advancer, Royal, High Five. Right, Kavakay, happy belated birthday. Thank you very much. Sounds like you've painted the town, but hopefully not red. Tax bookkeeping joke. Yeah, so for my birthday I basically did my taxes, as I do every year. Yeah, no, it wasn't red, but not far. Yeah, what did I do for my birthday? Do you know what? I'm getting to the age now where a quiet night in is my kind of birthday. So yeah, me and my significant other went for a nice meal in my favourite restaurant. Shout out to Las Iguanas restaurant. Best damn South American food you'll find. Interestingly, I've been going to, if any of you are from the UK, it's now a chain, and it started in Bristol when I first moved to Bristol in 1999, I think, and there was one tiny little restaurant called Las Iguanas there, and I think it was a Brazilian couple that owned it, and I lived about 3 doors down the road, so it became my sort of regular haunt, and just incredible food there. And then years later, where did I move? I moved to London, and they opened a Las Iguanas in London, so I was like, great. And then I moved back to Cardiff, and they had a Las Iguanas there. And now I'm in Manchester, there's Las Iguanas here, so awesome. Anyway, your tips on the vocal ARP are a huge help. I'll give them a try and let you know how I get on. Cool. Yeah, do let us know, because that was kind of a weird one. Sorry I couldn't have been more specific. I was struggling to even get anywhere close, and yet amazing track. Yeah, it was. Thanks for the tips. You're welcome. Deb Marcinko, Mexican Deb Mouse. Hey Dom, happy birthday to you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but I spelt the name wrong in the last video on how to pronounce my name. That was a mistake because English is not my native language. Well, it wouldn't be because you're Mexican Deb Mouse. I should correct myself and say that my artist name is pronounced right. Now, this is also, it depends on where you're from in the world, because I pronounced it, I think, 3 different ways. I think there was Loca, Locha, and Locha. So it's all about the CH, and you've now spelt it Loukha. Now if you're in America, that would be Loca, but if you're Eastern European, a KH would be a hard sound, so it'd be Locha. And so I don't know, I'm guessing it's a hard CH. I'm guessing you're Eastern European maybe, and therefore it would be Locha. But that doesn't matter no more. My question would be, do you prefer using percussion samples from sample packs, or do you like to record them yourself like Stimming does and shape them how you prefer it? Royal, high five. For me, I always say there's no point reinventing the wheel. If you've got sample packs with percussion sounds, use them. It's pointless going out and recording a Congo drum when you've already got one in a sample pack that's probably a better recording than we could do ourselves. However, one of the things I love about Bitwig is the sampler that's built in. But if you don't use Bitwig, I do highly recommend Xfer Nerve for triggering drum samples. You get your 16 pads, you drag and drop your samples onto the pads, but when you click on each individual pad, you then have a load of different effects. You can change it to be more of a sine wave or a saw wave, or throw in some distortion, or you can reverse it, or you can shape the ADSR values. So I do that in Bitwig, and any Bitwig users can do all of that. But if you don't have Bitwig, then I do probably recommend Nerve, because it's awesome for that, and it's all just in one, and then you can trigger them from MIDI in the same channel, which is also awesome. So yeah, so I tend to use samples, but I tend to do a lot of shaping. So for example, one of the remixes I've been working on this week, on the last 16th of beat 2, I think, I've put in a tom drum. Now this tom drum actually comes from a loop, but weirdly it's a loop from a sample pack that I made for Loop Masters, and I was flicking through them and found this one loop that had a tom drum that I really liked, but I didn't like the rest of the loop to fit in this track, so I then had to reshape it. And then I grabbed the tom drum and got a transient designer and gave it a really sharp attack, and then using ADSR shaped it to be a short decay and a really low sustain. So yeah, so I like to play with my percussion, and I think a lot of people probably notice the percussion in my tracks tends to be quite sharp. And yeah, I like a lot of transients in my percussion. So yeah, bit of both really. I'll use a sample pack, but I'll always shape it afterwards. Larson Wild, Royal, high five. I know you aren't a big fan of compression, however, any tips or settings on using Bitwig's stock compressor to glue several breaks and loops together? Do I have Bitwig open? Yes, I do. I'm not sure I really have any tips. I mean, I guess gluing stuff together is definitely a good reason to be using a compressor. You've got 2 different compressors in Bitwig. You've got compressor and you've got dynamics. So it's worth looking into these. Compressor is just a standard compressor, and I always sort of explain that as you set your threshold to be whatever value you want, and then anything that goes over, any signal that goes over that threshold gets compressed by the ratio you set. So if the ratio is 2 to 1, then it means every 2 dB above gets brought down by 1 dB. If it's a ratio of 5 to 1, then every 1 dB it comes down to a compression of 2 to 1, so half. I'm getting confused with my own numbers now. Higher the ratio, the harder the compression. And then you've got infinity to 1, which would be a limiter. As for gluing, I guess, you know, you want your ratio to be fairly relaxed. I would say any more than 2 to 1 is probably a bit too hard. Also, well, what I would probably suggest actually is bring your threshold right down first of all, so it's just barely doing anything. Throw your ratio right up, and your attack, make it quite slow. I would say, you know, something like 15, maybe 20 milliseconds, something like that. And then bring up the threshold so that you can see what's happening, and this way you can hear. So basically you want to make it really extreme, and so throw the threshold, you know, right up, or right down, I suppose, the other way around. So you start with your threshold up so there's no effect, and bring your threshold right down so it's in full effect, and listen to how horrible it's making it, basically. And then start bringing the attack time down until you feel it's just letting some transients through and not much else. And then same again with the release, slowly open up the release time, knowing that it's going to sound a bit crap while your threshold is right down. Slowly open up the release until you feel, and it is a difficult one, I mean, you can Google the maths on it. So if your BPM is, say, 126 BPM, I can't remember the math, but it's like 160 milliseconds or something becomes a quarter beat, and so you then you can time your release so that it's basically in sync with the BPM, and then when you feel like that's the right amount of attack and release, then bring your threshold right up so it's not so obvious, and then bring your ratio down to, say, I mean, for gluing, I guess a ratio of 2 to 1. Anything above that you're probably going a bit extreme, but again it depends on what kind of effect you want on the track. So I always kind of struggle to explain compression, firstly because the numbers are a bit confusing, as I've already just proven. Well, they're confusing for me because they're upside down, but yeah, so that's something to play with. I would always say, you know, set your threshold and ratio to be really extreme, and then play with the attack and release, and just solo that channel as well. Just focus on the feel of the timing of when the compressor kicks in and when it lets go, and stuff like that. And then when you're happy with the timing and everything's kind of there with the groove, then you can start lifting the threshold so that there's less impact, and then lowering the ratio. With the dynamics, you'll notice you also have additional things like knee. So where normally, say, the ratio of 2 to 1, it will compress a ratio of 2 to 1 for every dB above threshold. You can change the knee so it's a smoother or a sharper curve. And also with the dynamics plugin, you have a low threshold and a high threshold, and the reason for that is it does like an upside down compressor, so anything below a certain level it will push up, which is called upwards compression. So again, if any of you guys want to look into that, then Google the phrase upwards compression. I think that should probably give you results. But basically it's like an inside out compressor, so where a compressor, anything that goes over the signal gets pulled down. With upwards compression, anything below the low threshold gets pulled up, basically. And you can do both at the same time with dynamics, which will really squash the dynamics so everything fits into this sausage space. So again, you know, it's all subjective, and these are some of the reasons why I kind of don't recommend people use compressors, because it's quite easy to go wrong with them. And I always sort of say, you know, if you think you need a compressor on your kick drum alone, then you probably just need to work a bit harder on the kick drum in the first place, because you know, unless you know exactly what you're doing with a compressor, it can sometimes sound a bit crap. So yeah, hopefully that's some information there. Whether it's useful or not, I don't know. Yeah, so you're saying glue several breaks and loops together. So yeah, I would play around with the dynamics one. I would. Yeah, you know, it's subjective. At the end of the day, some people don't like a lot of dynamic range in their drums, whereas some people want lots of dynamic range. So it's kind of, there aren't any hard and fast settings. I couldn't tell you set your threshold to minus 10 dB, because I don't even know how, you know, what level your signal is going to naturally. If your signal is going to 0 dB naturally, then setting your threshold at minus 10 dB is just crazy talk. So yeah, so there's no hard and fast settings, and I think that's probably why people struggle to explain compressors or share settings or whatever. So yeah, thanks, keep up the good work, cheers. Andrew Hollis, hi, have you been following goings on at NAMM and anything that has caught your eye? So kind of, yes. I've seen a few people, quite a few of my friends are over at NAMM, and I've seen them posting stuff. In fairness, most of my mates who are at NAMM are guitar music studio guys, so they're not really into the synths. I've seen a few synths come through, like I've seen OP have done the, is it now the PO or whatever, which looks cool, but I was never a huge fan of the OP anyway, so I've got to be honest, I don't think I've seen anything that's blown my mind this year. There usually is at least one or two that blows my mind, but I don't know if it's an age thing. I was thinking about this earlier. I don't know, like, as you get older you sort of get less synth envy, and I don't know if that's because I'm just older and wiser, or whether it's because I have more synths now, or whether there aren't as many good ones coming out, you know. I guess that's the whole Moore's law thing. Also, maybe my speakers, but I'm sure it sounded like there has been a washing machine on in the background of a couple of vlogs. Not this one though. Any truth to this? Maybe. I don't think so though. The washing machine's downstairs and rarely gets used on a Friday. There is, however, behind me through a wall or two, the heating boiler. Maybe that's kicked in because we're in winter. I don't tend to need it on during the day, but you might have spotted that. Otherwise, I've got a Mac there and a PC there, and in my last studio, when I had a proper studio, the camera was further away. Whereas now we're, you know, it's fully zoomed out and we're up close. So it could be that. Yeah, don't know. Probably not a washing machine though, but well spotted. In fact, tell me, is it a low end noise or a high end frequency? Is it? Yeah, Royal, high five. Also, I think you should do the keyword at random times during the video to stop people just fast forwarding to the end of it. Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm going to give you the keyword now. If you guys are paying attention to this video, the keyword is NAMM. So that's NAMM. And last one, Outsider. Happy belated, Dom. Cheers. Similarly to Unknown Artist, my comment didn't show up last week. Ugh, YouTube dramas, yeah. That may be a blessing for you, as it was a bit of a long one, if I remember correctly. Please do, if these questions don't show up, send them again, because I'm always open to long questions. We're, 20 minutes in, and this is the last one, so yeah, we're all good for time. My question for this week is, do you think layering percussion loops, for example wind chimes, top loops, random Foley, etc., is a legitimate way to fill out a track if you tuck it away so you hardly hear it under the main elements, such as your own percussion, basses, etc.? I guess. I mean, it depends on what, I suppose it depends on what the track is. If it's a big techno banger, do you want wind chimes and things underneath that? I don't know. Whereas if it's like ambient electronica, then yeah, that's cool. I also like it when a producer puts something in a track that no one else would ever notice. I quite often do it, and I can't think of a single one that I've done now to tell you. There have been things in some of my tracks, I'll try and remember it another time if I can, but there have definitely been some tracks I've released even in the last couple of years where even if it's just a bum note in the background, or there's been a click or a pop where I've gone, I'm going to keep that and then I'm going to repeat it somewhere underneath and just really just mess things a bit. And there's been a few things where I've sort of paid homage to maybe another producer or whatever. So yeah, I like it when there's something hidden away. But is it a legitimate way to fill out a track? I guess. But I feel like there are probably better ways of achieving that. Sometimes to fill out a track, something I've done a fair amount in my tracks is I've grabbed a vocal from a royalty-free sample pack, grab a vocal, and where you can hear an extended vowel, an oo and an ah or an e sort of sound, find a point in that that is maybe like a 16th beat long and just loop it. Make sure there's no clicks on the looping of it, and drag that note out, then maybe melodyne it or auto-tune it or whatever so it's in key with your track, and then drench it in reverb. Doesn't need to be long reverb, you know, maybe 3-second decay on a reverb, but like 70, 80, 90% wet signal, and then sidechain that and then bring it way down in the mix, and it just fills the spaces around the kick drums then, and it just has that little pulsating pumping sound in the background, just this weird atmos. And if you listen back to probably a fair few of my tracks, you'll hear little bits like that going on. So I think that probably works a bit better as a filler. Otherwise, you know, like you say, the wind chimes and stuff like that, again, drench it in reverb, because sometimes you can do things that are slightly out of time, like you know, putting a delay on something that's just not in sync, and if you drench it in enough wet reverb and then sidechain the reverb, it gives the effect of being in sync even though it's not fully in sync. So I find that's probably a good way to sort of fill in spaces sometimes. I've been watching a few in the studio type videos to try and get new ideas, and it seems a couple of people do this. I'd never thought of it before, but it seems to sound okay. I would have assumed it could very easily get quite messy. So yeah, kind of what I was just saying, if you drench it in reverb, chuck it really low down in the mix so it's far away in the background, and make sure the reverb is, you know, really wet, then it can be distant enough that it just fills in that space and subtle enough without getting too messy. However, transients are your enemy when it comes to stuff like that, so which is why when you say wind chimes, in my head there's a lot of transients in a wind chime noise, so maybe not wind chimes specifically, but again, if it was on, say, you know, 90% wet or even 100% wet reverb, then you're going to lose a lot of the transients anyway, so it kind of smooths out the sounds and they sort of blend from one to another then. So yeah, so I think that's sometimes a cool thing worth doing, but it also needs to be planned into a track, and I think that's another thing you need to consider, is if you've got a track that just sounds a bit empty, just plonking in some atmos noise might not help it. But if it's part of the original plan and you're building around that atmos, then it's probably more likely to help. Yeah. And that, my friends, is it for this week. We're coming up to half an hour, so that's all good. The battery's not going to die or the camera going to cut off. Yeah, as usual, keep your questions coming. I really do enjoy these Friday sessions with you guys. So yeah, keep your questions coming. Ask me anything you want, whether it be sound design, production, whatever. Last week was quite good, the fact that some of you had linked a couple of YouTube bits, and it was quite nice to be able to sort of talk through that in real time, so that's all good. Not necessarily, but whatever. Yeah, so that's it for today. Hope you all have a good weekend, and I'll see you same time next week. Cheers.